In 1985, Australian photographer Leo Meyer, his assistant Harold Weldon, and an entourage of Chinese officials and translators set off on a 7-week journey across China. Their task, to make a reconnaissance of the entire 10,000 kilometers of the Long March Road, visiting remote regions never before open to foreigners, and paving the way for an unprecedented international photographic expedition 6 months later, celebrating the 50th anniversary of the Long March.
The skies are incredible.
The first stop, Qingkangshan in southeast China, the cradle of a revolution. Qingkangshan is a wild outcrop of forested mountain, 240 kilometers long. In the 1920s, its volcanic peaks were home to wolves, tigers, and bandits. In late 1927, young peasant commander Mao Zedong arrived here with the dispirited remnants of his communist guerrilla army. The uprisings in the cities had failed. Mao himself had been taken by government troops and forced to buy his way out of captivity. And the communist cause seemed about to die an early death. But Qingkangshan was to be the turning point of the communist story. As he began his ascent of the mountain, Mao had to break one of the Communist Party rules in order to survive and strike up an alliance with the bandit chieftains of the area. With only 1,000 men, it was essential to have the 600 bandits on his side rather than against him. He also argued that these unorthodox allies could make excellent revolutionary fighters, given the right leadership. In the spring of 1928, another peasant commander, Chu De, and his army of 900 arrived in Qingkangshan with orders to correct Mao's errors. The united Red Armies were attacked by government forces. Mao and Chu, with the help of the bandits, repelled the nationalists without difficulty. Mao's ideas on how to organize a peasant army and expand the revolution made sense to Chu. Mao believed that the revolution should be rurally based and not centered in the cities as the Russians had. But it was an idea that brought Mao into further conflict with the leadership of the party.
The Russian Revolution started when they already had a lot of industry. That's the big difference. The Chinese Revolution started when they didn't have any industry worth talking about. And this is how the row started. Mao said, you can only make revolution about peasants because that's what there are in China. But the Moscow trained people said, no, 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 the proletariat in the towns must be the spearhead, you see. Well, it didn't work. It didn't apply to China. I think that was the big difference.
Chu and Mao soon felt strong enough to swoop down into the neighboring province of Jiangxi to extend the Soviet area and set up their new style of communist system. For 500 years, Jiangxi had been one of the rice bowls of China. The wealth and power of the local landlords and merchants made the province an important cultural center and the home of leading statesmen and scholars. But here, like most of China of the 1920s, oppression and poverty prevailed. 70% of the land was controlled by the landlords, who constituted only 1 to 2% of the local population. The landlords would take up to 70% of the peasants' crops in rent, and taxes were often collected 10 years in advance. All land was confiscated and distributed to the poor peasants. Although moderation was shown to petty merchants and rich peasants so as not to alienate these vocal sections of the rural community, the landlord was shown little mercy. For nearly 3 years, the newly won Jiangxi Soviet was the pride of the communist movement. But to President Chiang Kai-shek, who was facing an inevitable all-out war with the Japanese, it was a thorn in his side. With almost 1 million men at his disposal, Chiang decided to smother the communists once and for all.
Troubled China turns on the enemy within her gates. These bombing planes of the Nanking government get ready to attack the rebel strongholds in Kiangsai. Contact! High over the mountains, movie-tone flies with the air forces of President Chiang Kai-shek. This is an actual bombing raid, and as we sight the first of the rebel villages, we commence the attack. Chiang Kai-shek is making desperate efforts to unite the various provinces of China, many of which are torn by internal dissension. And if he can't do it, he tries another, including bombs. China, Far East, land of ancient culture, land of bloodshed, rebellion, and war.
The communists were shatteringly defeated.